Yeah.
Okay. I'm having the second conversation that just let me tell everybody out there right now has been, we haven't had it yet, but I know it's going to be revelatory because that is who this person in front of me is all about. Revelation, insight, meditation, contemplation, the whole thing. I'm speaking to British pianist Jonathan Phillips. We're going to talk about your second album in about the past half year, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, from the point of view of it being released,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and from the point of view of being
Yeah.
released, your 2023 Divine Art Recording Group release, Chopin, Ballads and Nocturnes. Now,
Yeah.
the first recording that I encountered you with was your Bach recording. And I'm real clear now that you just are going to do whatever you want to do, period. I mean, in other words, your motivation is way beyond being a pianist showing off. It's a powerful. Both of these albums are powerful meditations on art and history and emotion and intellect and all the rest of it. And so that's why it's always so refreshing and so hard to write about. We're going to be chatting really directly. We're going to go right into it after I kind of do a quick overview about who you are and what you do. It's like the first four ballades of Chopin, from Opus 23 to Opus 52. I think we pretty well covered that. What are we? Five nocturnes. No wonder it took me so long. Opus 9, Opus 32, Opus 15, Opus 55, Opus 62, which will be a question about how you decided to order them, or
Okay.
if they even needed to be ordered. You
That's
will,
that's fair. That's fair game. Yeah.
okay, and let's just quickly do your bio because you're way beyond you're way beyond that conversation. But just so everybody knows for the second time, graduate of the Royal Northern College of Music,
Yeah.
where you studied with Sulamita Aronofsky. I hope I got that right, and past postgraduate work with Alexander Kelly in London.
Right.
You live in the Cotswolds,
Yep.
uh, all that good stuff. You're married, you have a couple of grown up kids who will support you in your old age if
I hope so.
necessary, we hope. You have degrees in music and in philosophy,
Yeah.
and that's where I'm in trouble because I love it, but you are way beyond intellectually, really, and introspectively just notes and technique, way beyond, and that's what's so exciting about both of these albums. Um, Music and philosophy, and as you mentioned so blithely, and I love that because I understand that the direction of where you're coming with these two CDs is, quote, if I may, I don't care less about anything. I'm just this is important to me
Yes.
to
Yeah.
record, and to record my way and based on my revelations and my introspection about these works. And I find that wonderful because you know who talks about your Bordeaux wine collection I must visit, and a fascination with ancient Greek and Roman history.
Yeah.
Come on. I'm trying to figure out the kings of England, kings
Okay.
and queens of England, but little and Greek, and particularly the Roman history is just amazing. I'm so fascinated by all of that. But this is where your mind is,
Yeah.
and then
That's
you plop down on these composers and intellectually dissect them painlessly. Okay. Anyway, that's who we're talking to, pianist Jonathan Phillips. You're fabulous. The idea of technique or skills or your how many times you've played these pieces, it doesn't matter one bit. It's how your mind has cogitated, if you will. Oops, sorry, a car's going by.
okay.
The deep sub-basements of this material. So, and I wanted to let everybody kind of remind everybody. First of all, we're talking about Frédéric Chopin, and I want, as I mentioned to you earlier, these years, born in 1810, died in 1848, tragic,
Yes.
39 years old, absolutely, horrible because of what he may have produced. We talk about that all the time about other composers, but in this case, it's particularly powerful
Yeah.
because he's probably the most influential composer for in his short career in maybe the history of music. I mean, this guy is astonishing.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then this quote that you put into your first album about your Bach album. By the way, I'm finally going to finish the review and get it up here in a day or two. I hope.
Hooray.
Cross my heart and hope not to die. Um, uh, Again, because it's tough.
Yeah.
Because I have to explain in words what you produce, and I find it wonderful and challenging, but I'm very fussy about words, and I want to make sure I get the right words. Anyway, this is a quote that you put in your first album. We talked about it just a few minutes ago, and I think it's the solution, it's the key, it's the cipher to how you approach these works. Quote: "I felt maybe Kant was onto something. His conditions are the condition of felt response." The condition of felt response. You look at that very, very seriously. And the absence of rules, and you've already explained in the first album, this is the same thing. You know, they're recorded, as you put it so charmingly, these are recorded live performances, is what you mean. And correct me if I'm wrong, you go into the recording studio. By the way, again, is that the same piano from the Bach that you used for the Chopin? Any idea?
It's the same piano for the nocturnes, Dan. It's the same piano for the nocturnes. The ballades was on a different piano. We tried to get one that was going to match them as well as possible. It's just that the action on the piano for the Bach and for the nocturnes, it's slightly slower, slightly heavier. It's a slightly more mellow instrument, and it wasn't quite the instrument for playing something as dynamic as the ballades. So we just had to find another one that had a bit more. I said not percussion is the wrong word, but just a little more energy to it and a little less dark chocolate.
Yeah,
so, but at the
fascinating.
same time, I didn't want it to be a sort of screaming disjunction between the two instruments on
It
one.
wasn't. It wasn't, but I was curious. I was a little
Yeah, but
curious.
there is a difference. Yeah,
And also the engineering is fabulous. The instruments, I now understand, just
yeah,
sound brilliant.
yeah,
But there you go again, about making these kind of crucial uh,
yeah.
um, distinctions in your own taste and your own need to make a sound work the way you want it to sound.
Yeah,
So that's what we're
it's
dealing with here.
yeah, it's nice to be in a position to do that, Dan, because I think for a lot of professionals, you know, particularly if you get signed up by a big label, it's like, well, we want you to do X, Y, and Z repertoire, fine. Oh, we booked you to do this. It's in wherever it might be, and you have to turn up and do it on that instrument, and that's it. That's the
Yeah,
gig.
yeah,
And I've been in the privileged position to say, well, I'm in charge of this, both from either doing it my way, but also finding the right engineer, finding exactly the right venue, the right piano, and thinking this will suit this project, and this is going to enhance it, rather than having to put up with the fact that, well, it's today, you're being paid X, you've got this guy here, it's all happening, you've got 2 days in the studio, bang, and off you go to the next thing. That's the life of a professional. I accept that, and I've done that in the past, and which is why I hated it so much. But it was so nice to have the control and to say, right, this is how we're going to do this. We need to find the right acoustic, the right engineer, the right piano, with the right touch, the right ambience for all this, the quality and the nuance that is required of this exceptionally complex music. And also, you know, I've had plenty of time to think about it. So, you know, some of these pieces have been in my repertoire for 150 years or
yeah.
whatever it
You
is.
mentioned age 15 and stuff. As
Yeah.
with all other really major pianists, that's why
Yeah.
it's so stunning and so
Well,
revelatory. To me, I'm just a conductor. You know, to me, it was revelatory, let alone to other pianists. Yeah,
well, that's very gracious of you, Dan. But I think it's incumbent on any artist to be able to absorb the music over a period of time and to leave it, let it gestate, come back and work at it again. I always say to people, you know, they think you carry this thing around you fully formed all your life, and actually you go through performances. You might leave it for a year or two. It goes into another program. It's a bit like, you know, if you climbed Everest one year, you trained for it, you got all the right people together, you had this objective, you have the timing, you went to that peak, and then you don't do it for a couple of years. You've got to start all over again from base camp. Otherwise, you'll get killed halfway up. So you have to go right through that process. And each time you do it, you bring some of the experience from the previous time, and you think, aha, now this time I'm going to try and do that. And it's never quite the same, but I just felt I was in the right place to think I can bring these four together now, which is something I'd wanted to do but had never had the courage to do. They are quite tricky to put in the same program. It's quite physically demanding, and just the concentration to put them into a program. So that was a challenge to do it. But yeah, you're right. You have to think in terms of you have a way of playing it, but that evolves over time, and it's punctuated by pauses and by kind of subconscious growth away from actually playing them, because you'll learn another. And that's the wonderful thing about one's development as a musician, is that some of the stuff happens to you because you're doing other things and you're away from this. You come back to it with a new insight and a new depth of perspective. And I just felt ready to give it a go. I think.
Yeah, and the importance of subconscious work. I mean, the other several consciousnesses that I believe are in our brain are hard at work, whether we know it or not. And you also reminded me, unhappily, I'll have to go flail myself after the interview, of so many performances I conducted when I was in my 30s and didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue. I did, just as we kind of the gist of what we're saying about pianists who have a clue. Sure, they have the technical ability and they do it all, but this art grows on us, and we become the better for it.
Exactly, and that would probably explain why some of the really great artists, I was always surprised, but you find that somebody like Brendel or whoever has deleted a whole part of their back catalogue because they sit there in their 60s and 70s and we're thinking, oh, that's not really how I want it to come out. But actually, it has a merit all of its own for that youthful exuberance or whatever it may be.
Sure,
but looking back, they think maybe that's not how I play it now. And it's a shame that some of that gets discarded, but I know how they feel. It's like, it changes, and so you have a very different perspective.
I'm thinking of Bernstein's Kaddish, the number 3 symphony. I remember rushing out to buy the recording when it first came out right after Kennedy's assassination, and it was all over our sleeves and our emotions and our tears and everything else. And later, he came back. I'm still not happy about it, but he came back and slashed and burned it considerably to make it less, youthfully sentimental, if you will. So there you are. Okay, well, let's get anything else before we just jump in. Oh, I wanted to read a couple of things in this album that you write about. And again, because you say it so much better than most of us, you say, quote, "You can hear Bach's influence everywhere in Chopin." And I really had not quite gotten there until you made me. And not necessarily, you say, as strict counterpoint, but as counter melody, all that wonderful, if you will, Baroque technical stuff, and inner part writing, and I hadn't really considered how influential Bach was for all of us in composition and interpretation and everything else. These characteristics, you say, especially the harmonic and chromatic elements, influenced the writing of his contemporaries, Chopin's contemporaries. And I would suggest, you say, and I agree with you, that progression via Chopin through Liszt and Schumann, it's so obvious now, had an important subsequent effect on the chromaticism and harmony of Wagner and Mahler and so forth. That's what we're talking about, a guy dead at 39, that powerful an influence on us, and if you will, just a pianist. I mean, the compositions are overwhelmingly piano compositions. And then another quote, and then we'll dig in. Quote, "Once again, and critically for me, this recording, rather like the Bach Tranquility." I can't wait to put both of these up. And by the way, I have networks now that will throw this thing out to the universe. I'm not boasting. I'm just saying the internet is grand once you figure out how to kind of use it. Anyway, you refer to the Tranquility album, was made in such a way as to replicate a live performance. Now, here's the thing that's so important for us to understand as we listen to it. And speaking of daring do, quote, "2 consecutive live performances were given, and that was it." And I love your attitude in your maturity here. It's just like, hey, I'm going to do it live twice, and that's it. And we'll see how it goes. There is no point, you say, in endless editing. Bravo, bravo, bravo. As for me, the sanitized performance of a highly edited recording no longer communicates that which takes place in live performance. And it's practically oxymoronic, what you've just said. It's so obvious. And yet it's about the absence of rules and it's about felt response. So that's why I wanted to. That's why I was so that quote really is going to be with me for a long, long time. Okay, now I'm going to do my stream of consciousness thing.
Okay.
And remember, I could be all wrong because I just sit down and, you and I and everybody else in the profession have heard these works a million times. Uh, and I was absolutely taken to an entirely different place. So you've got it. You've got it. And you've got it because there is no ego. I'm just convinced of that. So we're looking at the Ballade number 1, G minor, very interesting, Opus 23. Here's what I say. As in the Bach album, every phraselet, I hope that's a real word, is parsed to a perfection of thought. Not a perfection of technique, although that's a given, but a perfection of thought, let alone technique and purpose. The swells, the passions, the exuberances, all there without extra fuss or late 19th century performance bravura. You know how these all were so, muddied in the sobbing late 19th century performance practice. The notes all speak for themselves, and that is not just a dumb statement. That's how I feel you approach this music intellectually. Each note in my hearing somehow magically speaks for itself, let alone when it's paired and primed and distilled. A couple more, and then I'm going to let you have at this Ballade number 1 and how you approach it. Phillips hears and presents clearly the bits of harmonic interest, and this is really throws me every time. Little moments that others let pass by, or that others will smash into, like you're breaking down a house or something. So you present clearly the bits of harmonic interest so easily overlooked by others. Phillips has something to say. Beauty is transcendent. No flourishes without intention. Just virtuoso playing and astonishment of truths. The written pyrotechnics, they're all in appropriate placement. The pianist is second to the music itself. That's you.
Yeah.
That's you for sure. Makes the piece a whole new story. Once ego is removed, the fast sections are ravishingly beautiful, even as they fly by, and so on. But I'm now really clear that ego is out of the picture with you altogether, and that's what makes these performances revelatory. Ballade number 1, give it to me. G minor, Opus 23.
Wow. Okay. Well, Dan, thank you. I'm not quite sure what to say. I think there's an essence to what you say, which is completely true. And to quote the title of a book by an American Stoic philosopher chap called Ryan Holiday, he wrote a book called "Ego is the Enemy," and it's an interesting book on many levels. But that title stuck with me, and it absolutely is the enemy. It gets in your way. You have to look and just see. Chopin wrote this, and you have to look at the text, and you have to go back to basics, and you have to think, well, what's this all about? What about? It's my job is to try and recreate this and get the story across. And you can't. I've never enjoyed playing that gets in the way of it. When you say you hear somebody play, you don't hear Chopin, you hear whoever it may be playing, and that's the opposite of where I was brought up, how I evolved, what my kind of aims are, and there's a clarity and a transparency and a luminosity to Chopin's work, which can really get drowned in resonance and in, as you say, all that extra sort of
bravado.
Just extra, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it'd be interesting to look at the term bravado and bravura, because one seems almost pejorative in the sense of playing music. There is something about bravado, which is a kind of a great kind of confidence, and I play with
you play with much bravura as well.
Yeah,
in this CD. Yeah,
yeah, where it's required. You think, well,
exactly right.
okay, this
Exactly
is
right.
what you've got to do. So yeah, it may be a little bit for some people, a bit careful or a bit reserved or a bit on the chamber music side, perhaps. But I try to let rip where it's appropriate and where the music where there's a sense in which that passage work, in particular in the first ballad, is taking you through and bringing you back to a a wonderfully massive augmented version of the original theme that you've had that was so mellifluous and beautiful and in F major and just lilting and lyrical and gorgeous. And suddenly here it is with biceps. It's like it comes back. Um, and the other thing is about tempo and about pace and being able to still hear everything that's contributing towards the drama. Drama doesn't necessarily isn't predicated entirely upon speed or noise. And I think for a lot of I find with a lot of younger players these days, they just need to slow down a bit and just give it some air, just give it throttle it back and give it some license. But yeah,
And
that's
they
kind
will in time.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
about aging. Finally, we mature. I'm
That's right.
76 now. Am I 76? I'm
Yeah.
finally beginning to figure stuff out.
Yeah, and I think that comes with time and with performance experience and being able to get over your nerves and sit back and do it again. And you've got to the umpteenth performance of it over 20 years or whatever it may be, and you think, oh, I'm kind of getting the hang of this now, and and that is largely about being able to create the excitement, have the template in your head be. I mean, essentially, when I play, Dan, I'm singing. I am singing into the instrument. I am phrasing everything. I'm I've never learnt singing. I'm married to a singer, but I think that it is for me, it's the engine room of my whatever I'm doing as I'm playing. It's all happening vocally and hearing everything as if I was my own, little four-part quartet. You have to be able to hear absolutely everything and shape everything and hear it in advance of what you're putting through the keyboard. Um, and that, which is that's an interesting point because people often say about pianists, oh, it's all just muscle memory and they can sit there. They're probably wondering what's for tea as they're playing, whatever. That's just not true. Certainly in my case, it's a connection to and a driving through the phrasing as if you were having to sing it in a 5,000 seat auditorium, and that connects you to it in a way that makes it much more lyrical and much more vulnerable in some senses as well.
And,
So,
and by the way, about those last few bars of the ballade, the shocking
oh
harmonic
yeah, absolutely,
smash. Well,
yeah,
everybody smashes them.
yeah,
It's supposed to just knock you off your seat. No, wrong. So I say the last few bars, which have always given my ears a tiny harmonic backlash, because they're shocked. It's a shocker. It comes out of, as far as I can tell, this harmonic structure that is that first chord in those last couple bars is just from out of nowhere. You can clear me up on that if you
yeah,
will, but they work best just left alone,
yes,
so to speak, as Phillips does. In other words, they're there, the markings are there, the chord is shocking enough, and that whole little last couple bars, and you don't need to do anything else. It's just there, it's in place, and
yeah, absolutely,
then you have to
absolutely.
meditate for 70 years to figure out what on earth he was thinking when he put those last couple bars in.
Well, that's a whole other story, isn't it? I have no clue, no conception. I cannot get my head around the kind of brain, the kind of
Mm.
talent that is required to write this. So it's one thing to learn it and play it and to understand it and get it across it to people so they understand it. That's a whole other world. But to actually conceive of it in the first place and to write it down and be so specific because actually it's about what he left out. And the same is true with other great pianist composers. It's about the fact that they've already been very highly curated by these great masters. And it's incumbent on us as performers to really think, well, okay, he could have done this, he could have done that. And, over time we look at different editions and there are some tweaks and changes to it. But broadly speaking, here's the text. And it could have been otherwise. It's not a kind of, he could have written all sorts of extra things in there, but he chose not to. He didn't kind of emulsify the end by thickening it up with cream and oil and whizzing it all up with lots of noise and a kind of Lisztian version of it. It's actually quite transparent.
But a lot of performers make that mistake.
exactly.
If you will, make that Lisztian mistake. No offense, Franz.
Yeah. No, and you know, and that's a different genre, isn't it? It's a different style, it's a different idiom. That actually they were, well, I mean, the first etudes are dedicated to Liszt, aren't they? You know, so they all were in awe of this chap. They really thought, my goodness me, this is a harmonic landscape we haven't really heard before. And even though Schumann and Liszt kept their own complete identities and their own language, I think they were both enthralled and entranced by Chopin's harmonic landscape. And yeah, so you wouldn't want to play Chopin. It's very easy to broadly put romantic composers in one big pot and say, I'll play Schumann, Liszt, and Brahms and Chopin like this. No, please don't do that.
And besides, he's dead by 1849. I mean, he's not in the same zone, if you will, as the others later, if you will.
Yeah.
That's another big revelation to me that I had. It's not like I've heard this for the first time, but I'd never really considered, because of course I too have sort of shoved him into the grand romantic, which is actually late romantic composers and repertoire, and that's just not correct. Although he was certainly a precursor, if you will, to that
Absolutely.
kind of romanticism. Anyway, that's something, and that last couple bars just will make me think while I take a long walk later after all of this is over today, because a part of me wants to use words, forgive me, because it's not quite right, but like schizophrenic, or even bipolar, because that particular last couple bars comes out of, in my view, tell me if I'm wrong, but it just comes out of nowhere. Or not.
I mean, arguably, compositionally, one could say, yeah. How does that work? I mean, there's this wonderful moment just before the beginning of the coda, where it all goes kind of mad, and he builds it. I mean, this wonderful 6/4 second inversion of G minor chord, and
there you go. I'll have to go back to Cal Arts and figure out what you just said, but go ahead.
And then as dominant seventh, and you back down the other side of the hill and crash. You're into these yada ba-da-da, ba-da-da. It's fantastic, and that all makes perfect sense. That's fine. And then it just goes nuts after that. And it is a bit of a race to the end. But when you get that dominant pedal with the big D at the bass, and then the chromatic scale up to the top, and a huge scale all the way back down to the bottom G, and there's this like this hammer blow at the bottom of the piano. A bit like those 3Ds that end the preludes, the Chopin preludes. It's terrifying. And then these ridiculous scales go up, and then the one intense, and then these split octaves. Yeah, that's a sort of moment of he's just lost the plot here, but it's so exciting. It's thrilling to play. And if you just get the timing right, the thing is, it's got to be thrilling for the audience. They haven't got to be just thinking, oh gosh, that's, you know, a lot of noise and fury and signifying nothing. You know, it's got to be, it's got to have had a point and a purpose, which is it's come after such a lot of very considered music making. But when he comes to that coda, it's like you don't know where he's going with this, which is why I think it's quite important. I start that a little bit slower than a lot of other people and try to build it through. I think if you go at it, if you're already at yada but I think it's mad. You've got nothing left.
Yeah, exactly right. Yes,
and
you know, pacing is everything.
Yeah, and particularly in live performance, you know, and that was the other thing, because we only had 2 goes at it, and it was only on one day in the studio. By the time I just had to realize that by the time we'd got the whole thing done, I had to save up. I think I recorded number 3 first, and then number 1, and then number 4, and then number 2, just because of the physics of playing and tiredness and concentration and things. And so, yeah, there's all that has to be considered, and that's part of it too. Is just factoring in how the piece is going to be delivered on a day like that when you're in the studio.
I'm seeing you being taken out of the studio in a wheelbarrow. I mean, just a complete, you know, wreck. But I mean, it's an astonishing feat all by itself. What you
yeah.
And it's not an astonishing feat of your own prowess and technical genius. It's just that's how you did it. You know what I'm trying to say here? It's like, again, ego isn't in the room.
Well, there's no room for it, Dan, anywhere. Yeah. You just have to give yourself over to the process, to the what you've committed to do, and just get completely involved in the task at hand, which is at any given point you're shaping this phrase, which is going into the next one, and you there isn't any extra room for how I feel about it, or it's a you're essentially, as a wonderful phrase by a very Christian Zimmerman, whose playing I absolutely adore. He said he considered himself first and foremost a craftsman, not an artist. And what he means by that is he spends most of his time working away, trying little things, thinking, how does that work? Polishing it up, putting it away again, coming back, just creating something, so that on the day that he comes to let us all have, the opportunity to hear what his considered verdict is on this particular piece, he's done all his due diligence. He's worked it and thought, well, this is how I want to craft it and recraft it for you. And that's the job. That's what we do. That's what we should be about. And paying some respect to the audience who's paid and turned up to actually listen to this person over here's music. I'm the channel for it. I've done the work to recreate it. I'm a recreative artist, not just a creative artist. I'm actually putting time and effort into somebody else's work to be able to produce it for people. And I just thought he captured that so beautifully, thinking of himself essentially as a craftsman. And the art bit takes care of itself. And occasionally, it goes really well, and you think, oh, that was terrific today. But the next day you find yourself kind of working away at something else. And I think that egoless part of it is, I think that absolutely applies to someone like him. And that's how I've always tried to do my work.
Well, the craftsmanship is always important and necessary, but intuition is really big, and I think you have intuited even more than your craftsmanship. You have intuited and then done so. You have come to conclusions in your intellectual processing. The craftsmanship is there, and did that make any sense? Something about that's what I love, intuition, and that's what this is all about. Sub-basement, sub psyche, all of that good stuff.
Yes, I mean, I'm not ruling out the wonderful aspects of what it is that each of us can uniquely contribute to recreating a composition, given the way in which our perception of it has been filtered through a prism that is our experience and our skill, to be able to then recreate it for people. That's a kind of there's all sorts of unknown things happening there. So I'm not saying just concentrating on literally the technical work of it's what you're then doing when you're crafting this and shaping it and learning it, is delivering it to a quality and to a way of getting the point across that's come through you, it's been mediated by your take on it, as it were. So it's a combination of your take, but your best possible craftsmanship as well, to be able to say, well, this is filtered through me. That's the wonderful thing. That's otherwise we should all go away. If it weren't possible for us to do this in art in general, not just piano in particular, then there'd be no point in us all recreating these wonderful masters, because every new person, every new musician, every new generation of musicians will see it in a different way, and they'll recreate it for their generation, sometimes well, sometimes not so well, whatever. But that's the point. It's a living thing, and you're bringing something alive for people right now. And that's actually the difference between art and craft anyway, surely, that the art can speak to generations and is still alive and has some form of meaning and purpose to it, whereas things that are craftsmen, they go in and out of fashion, and it's like, yes, it's interesting, but it's no longer moves us. This stuff will continue to move people, and will for the next, hopefully, if we don't all we're talking about geopolitics.
Yeah, let's not, because we're too close to trouble, big trouble.
That's the point of it, isn't it? It's a balm. It's something that is still relevant, and that's the wonderful thing. And suddenly you find another person comes along, another generation, and has a completely different take on it. But it's just as beautiful as the way that Lipatti played, or the way that Gilels played, or the way that all these wonderful artists have played over the years. You think, oh, that's another way of thinking of it. And so that, for me, that's the reason. Again, going back to our opening remarks, is just having the chutzpah to be able to say, well, I'm going to record the 4 ballads. Well, actually, there's room for, if it's good and you've got something to say, there's room for it. I would never have put it out if I felt it was just a copycat version of somebody else's thing. I mean, that's what's the point of that? I don't get that.
Yeah. And what you've
Um,
just said is why I don't read pulp fiction.
right.
I've read one or two Tom Clancy novels just because I'm so curious about how come he sold so well, and it's all very entertaining and a page turn and all the rest, and then there's nothing after. It's done. It's over. It's gone.
Yeah.
There's nothing there. We'd better move on.
Okay.
Ballade number 2 in F major, and again, these key areas are very interesting and very important. F major, Opus 38. Here's what I have to say. I'll wade through them, and then you take it from there. Phillips interprets the opening section, a hesitancy that speaks volumes about youth, maybe, naivete, optimism, and looking forward. Now that's kind of what I thought I was hearing finally, something about there be together with all of the other events in his life that are reflected in his music, there is this wonderful sort of optimism from time to time, and it's almost naive optimism, I'm thinking. Then the slam. I say, how excitingly eccentric, I say, just what Chopin wants. Phillips has chops to spare, but holds himself back, except as the composer designates. We've had this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
None of this excess is to be allowed because the composer will tell you when he needs more. Wonderful knowledge of this repertoire. Let's see, anything else? There are troubled areas. I interpret them as doubts and troubles, whatever was going on in Chopin's psyche, illuminated by the philosopher pianist. That's you. Brilliant playing on a bright and responsive instrument. Now that's the ballade's instrument. An amazingly sensitive interpretive study of doubt, angst, turmoil, brain fever, whatever one wants to call this ballade. Go. Straighten me out on this, especially about brain fever.
I think you're absolutely right. And you mentioned the word. Maybe it was off camera. I can't remember, but you mentioned the word the schizophrenic, and this one is particular because that opening is it's almost like something. It could be like another. It could be another piece from Schumann's Kinderszenen.
Yes.
So delicate, so refined, so. Again, it's just transparent. It just starts. And you've got this compound time signature, and it's C, and then suddenly from the C and with the harmonics, and he lets you have the F major chord, and with the right amount of coaxing of the A to give the major third, it's in that part of the piano. But to balance that and still maintain the C, just singing quietly over the top, and on a percussion instrument trying to coax sound one after the other. It's different in a phrase where you go to another note and build, but it's the hardest bit of the piece. that opening, honestly, all the the virtuosic stuff is tricky, right? There's no getting away from that, but that's the place that really finds you out in terms of your absolute control. That's horrendous. But
about eccentric. I mean, now that you mention it again, that F major opening.
Yes.
Is a kind of deceit. I was almost thinking, oh, this will be quite charming and quite nice, and then of course goes into his.
That's right, and it ends after how many bars it is, and you get this wonderful, rich bottom F and a lovely spread of an F major chord using all these wonderful harmonics, and it's really quiet. And then suddenly all hell breaks loose. You're sort of you're in an F major, but now he takes you into sort of a kind of A minor area. And you're in D minor a lot, obviously, because it's the relative minor, and it's just madness from there. But you're right. Then it kind of stalls and comes back to that theme a little bit. But then he uses very chromatic harmony to take you into very different areas, and he sort of coaxes that, and they become that theme of da dum da ya da da da. That's just becoming a little bit more scared and a little bit more. Oh, hang on, where are we going with this? And then he takes flight with it, comes back. That it's magnificent. But the part that is the prefix to the coda, that's really, really exciting. But when you actually then get to it, those last two pages, one absolutely fantastic. I think dramatically it just works extremely well. But if you don't hear those harmonies, if you don't hear some of the counterpoint, if you don't hear the way in which the harmony is pointing you towards these new sections, and you just kind of race through it, it sort of loses its musical point in a way. It's still very exciting, but I think they're the things that are the signposts to, well, I might go here, I might go there, but you pay attention to this because I might actually take you in this direction. As a composition, I think it's unique amongst all of his pieces. Well, as are so many of the others. But it's a it's a real horror to play on its own. If you just sat down to play it, you sort of, in a program, you'd want to have played the first 40 minutes, had a cup of tea, come back, a biscuit, play something else, then have a crack at it. It's well, that's true of all of them actually.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of craft,
yeah,
what amazing craft! What amazing craft! It's
yeah,
just about getting at where his psyche's coming from
yeah,
when he does go into an episode, shall we say?
yeah.
And we mentioned, or I'm not sure if it was before we recorded, but this idea of his exile from Poland, if you will,
Yeah.
I believe. You straighten me out on this one because I didn't bother
Oh, no,
looking up again.
yeah, he moved to Paris when he was very, very young,
Yeah.
and I know it's very easy for us to kind of pour scorn or cold water on the sort of it used to get rather overplayed in sort of academic textbooks 40, 50 years ago. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
the
exactly.
suffering away from home, and the little silver box that's with some Polish soil or whatever. It's all a
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
hello, But actually, it's probably true. And even if it wasn't true, he'd be perfectly entitled to feel that way because the guy's a Polish guy and he's had to emigrate,
Yeah.
for whatever it was, to get across to Paris. And then suddenly he finds himself in this strange new world.
It's like Ukraine and the West. It's
Yeah,
still separate. Eastern Europe is still a whole separate sort of consciousness, and it must have been traumatic
that's right.
for him. Yeah.
And for some people, it doesn't work at all, Dan. I mean, Rachmaninoff would have been the first to admit that after he left Russia, he struggled, compositionally with a lot of things. I think he just felt like a bit of a fish out of water culturally, and he missed Russia terribly. And I would say a lot of his really great music came before he left Russia. There's still a lot of great music, but he really struggled with it, I think, afterwards. So it's not always the catalyst for, well, I'll pour all my sadness and wistfulness and melancholy into these pieces. But for Chopin, it definitely worked.
Yeah. And I've somehow become more aware of immigrant composers and their immigrant experiences in music, concertos and so on. And there's always a sadness of
Yes.
missing the homeland. It's unavoidable. And people that I've spoken to are immigrants to this country. They always say, you're forever an immigrant. You're never at home in the country that you moved to. So that hit home with me when I was listening to all of this album today. That
I can't. I just thought, as a sort of postscript to that, I can't think who it was who said. But the essence of what I'm trying to remember is a phrase along the lines of, I can't remember which musician it was, but what they broadly were saying was, when they're composing or playing or improvising or just doing stuff at the keyboard, I can say things to the piano with my playing. I can launch myself into this music, which are the things I can't say in words to you anymore, because there's this gap between, because we were talking about words in our emails today, about the importance of it and about expressing things clearly. And words are all we have really in terms of logic and communication, but music's the other thing, right? And I just thought there was a rather beautiful way of capturing the idea that I can say things in music that I simply can't say in words.
And speaking of Rachmaninoff, I'm thinking of The Isle of the Dead.
Yes.
Just off the top of my head, as just an example of the undercurrents of his life and his psyche and so on. That's the beauty of our art form. We can express so many things so beautifully, even that are from our deep psyche. So that's what's so important. It's not pop music; it's art music. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Ballade number 3, A flat major.
Yeah.
Sounding pretty good. Opus 47. A tremendous understanding of Chopin from Phillips. These ballades are character studies. The artist about himself, such lightness of touch from Phillips, and this was refreshing to hear your approach to this ballade. A natural earnestness, so clear but so seldom realized by pianists. full playing, powerful, but not without reflection on every single note. I know you can't possibly do that, but it sure sounds like it. Like you meditate on each passing note. So you need to read some Pulp Fiction. You'll snap out of it. The complex mind and psyche of the composer, as we've been speaking over and over again, vulnerable, the power of passion, then out, then it's done. Go.
Well, as my own sort of précis of this piece, A flat major is an interesting key. It fits rather beautifully under the hands in many ways. I mean, there are sections that there's a really tricky bit in C sharp minor that's towards the end that's all over the place. But just there's something about, again, keys on the piano are so important. We know about D flat major. We know about some of these lovely keys that people have written so many beautiful things in. But A flat major for Chopin is a really beautiful thing in terms of the harmonics and the resonance that he gets from the instrument here. And the sort of that opening yam ba da 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 dee ba da, I'll stop singing. But if it was written in another key, I don't think it would be such a great piece. I think he's done this pretty carefully.
Very interesting.
And I can't say why exactly. And by the way, I haven't tried to transpose it. Top tip, don't bother. But I have a hunch that if it was in G major or A major, it would just be too bright. But there's a slight mellowness. It just takes the edge off it on those flat major keys on the instrument. And it's beautifully written. And again, there's a lot of transparency in the texture in this piece. So although he uses a lot of the keyboard, until you get towards the back end of the piece, it's quite sparsely written. And quite elegant, I think. It's not over the top. And the changeover where you're starting towards the coda is a slow build. And I just think that theme, yam, ba, 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 when he comes back at the very, very end and he turns that rather enigmatic, sort of slightly questioning, you sort of start the piece and think, oh, that's an interesting little idea, what we can do. By the time we get to the end, it's full on, it's not a polonaise exactly, but it's a big, expansive, rich, slightly more full-bodied version of itself with big chords and all the rest of it. And it just seems to be a very homogeneous, very organic piece. It flows really nicely. It kind of works for me in a way that the fourth ballade took me forever to get my head around. The third one I understood even as a boy, because I could get this.
And little wonder about the fourth. We're talking about number 4 in F minor, Opus 52. Please continue.
Yeah. Well, number 4 absolutely is very much. I mean, they're all difficult to try and analyze, Dan, because they weave a story, they weave a narrative, and he comes back to the original idea. In the fourth ballad, he's just embellishing that theme da da dee da da over and over again in different ways and with different textures. And we even get a small fugue in that at one point, just on one page.
I'm going to have to re-listen. That went right over my head. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just after the little A major cadenza, and he just holds the A for after, and the chord disappears. You have the A, and then A ba da dee dee da, and then the left hand comes in with the same thing, and that's just a lovely moment. Where is he going with this? And eventually we come back to the original theme in F minor, da da dee da da, with a hugely more kind of vigorous reinvention of that. And look, it's terrifying, but I compositionally, I struggled, 10, 20, 30 years ago with just getting my head around how you can make it work compositionally. And of course, there are some very tricky corners in there. So the coda is everybody who plays it will tell you, I'll only play that on a really good day. Because
magnificent turmoil and determination is what I call that last section. And out in the glittering fit, out with a glittering fit of color and finality. I mean, I can't get any better than that. And this seemed to me very Polish.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's there is a little bit more bombastic bravado in that final thing. I mean, it really is. But on the other hand, I tried not to take that too fast. Again, so you can hear, because such a lot of that will get lost in a booming acoustic on a big resonant piano. It's too fast, too much pedal, too much resonance. And it's like I can't really hear. But actually, if you just take it back a little bit, it's no less dramatic. But I think it just shows you where he's going harmonically, and I think that's the crucial thing.
Yeah, and it's that section you're talking about. I use the word rumination. He's ruminating, if you will,
Yeah,
about whatever is going on
yeah,
in his mind and so on. But what I meant by rumination is just it's not just useless pyrotechnical bravura, if you will, in the writing. There's a ruminative uh, aspect to it in my ear, and that does require careful listening, as in
yeah,
careful playing as well, so that
yeah.
doesn't get lost in some kind of late romantic
That's right.
crash and burn thing.
Yeah, he doesn't let you off the hook musically until the very, very, very end of that, and you have to pay attention right the way through. He holds you there with the tension of it. It's thrilling, but it can easily become a bit of a mess. And we've all been guilty of doing that. But you just have to be aware of what it is that you're trying to achieve. How is this going to come across to the listener? What are the main sort of signposts along the way harmonically that they absolutely have to hear in order for this to make sense? But yeah, it's not until the very come off that and they've got these four final chords. Right, I know we're going to be in F minor finally, because up to that point they could have taken you anywhere again.
Yeah.
Wonderful stuff.
Yeah. Good, and I take note that might be, of the four ballades on the recording, one of the most puzzling to comprehend, the most puzzling to, as you have said, wrap your mind around.
Absolutely.
Let alone technique and all the rest. So, what do I say here? Incredible. It's an incredible, complicated masterpiece. Where in the output is this, by the way? That was the question I wanted to ask you.
Well, it's pretty late. I mean, Opus 58, isn't it? The fourth ballad. So it's it's a very, very different animal from the second and third ballads.
Yeah, that's why I thought that I was really hearing a sort of Polish homesickness, if you will. But this was so distinctly native, if you will, to his character. Anything else before we move on to the nocturnes?
No, I just think as a group, for me, they are quintessential Chopin, and they represent, for me, I think in the notes, it's a distillation of what he's really all about as an extremely gifted craftsman composer, to actually create things that will sweep you along and keep you interested and take you along this journey and put you down at the end of it and think, oh, okay, wow, that was really something. And a lot of composers can't do that, and I think he does it extremely well in these four pieces. I mean, I can't think of a piece of Chopin that I don't like, right? Because I'm a fully paid up member of the fan club. But for me, they absolutely they're the essence of him. If that was all that was left, that would mark him out as a supremely sort of A-list composer, if you like. These four pieces.
And we're having a little bit of a delay, but I think it'll sort itself out in the playback. But and that it is interesting to me that I've kind of forgotten my train of thought, except that 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, 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 boom. Oh, my question is, does it all make sense? And also, is that why the ballades are in the beginning of the CD? Choices that you made that could have easily have been, you could have begun with the nocturnes.
That's a good question, Dan. I think from the point of view of putting it out there, there are versions of, people will just record the four ballads and that's it. It's a sort of 40-minute CD, and there it is. And they could have easily been interspersed with the nocturnes, and that would have probably worked quite nicely, actually. But that wasn't the aim originally. I just wanted to do the four ballads. And then the recording company said, well, that's okay, but actually we'd quite like some more, and there aren't any more ballads, so what else have you got up your sleeve, kind of thing, is the truth. And I said, well, I there's lots, but I think that they are the main event. But it's about having some music on there that is going to support this and not be out of kilter with it. So let me go away and have a think about that, and I'll come back to you. So I selected those so we could take the program up to whatever it is, an hour and 5 or whatever the CD is. But also,
that explains it. I mean, it is a functionality. It is a functionality. You're producing a CD, so there is that functional aspect.
Yes.
Thus leads to kind of an extension of my question, which is to say, therefore, why or how did you pick the order of the nocturnes?
Oh, right. Okay. So that's the really good question, Dan, because I think it was about setting. We've got the E flat major
Yeah,
nocturne, the very one that everybody knows, and most people who've
yeah.
got to a reasonable standard on the piano will have had a go at. Um, and then we've got the rather beautiful B major one,
Yes,
and then the F major, and then the F minor, and then the B major. So the keys, in a sense, on paper don't make any sense whatsoever. But playing them in that order, they did seem to make sense to me. Um,
well,
as a
I wondered because that's kind of what I looked at them in an overview sort of thing about tonality and key areas, and they all seemed to fit to
which
my
which
mind, you know?
which is a bit weird because you start off with the E flat major one, and arguably, he takes the root of E flat major and uses it for the D sharp as the third of B major for the new nocturne. So you've got a seamless transition into that one.
Mhm.
That's fine. Those two are almost joined at the hip in terms of key color,
Yeah.
and that's fine. And then you've got a bit of a gap, and then we're into F major, and we've got that rather beautiful early Opus 15 one. And that's like a standalone between the ones that then come after. But from the F major, you then go into F minor. So that was kind of
Interesting.
that worked.
Yeah.
But from the F minor into the last one, the B
The B
major,
major. Yeah.
yeah. Um, I can't think of any logical reason why you would put those two together, but I felt that of the way it worked, that's how they did work. And I think it's also my contention, if I think about this question, that I don't think Chopin wrote his 19 nocturnes to be played consecutively together in a program
Interesting.
or on a CD. He just kind of wrote that as and when during his lifetime he felt,
Sure.
oh, I'm going to do one of these. And so they're about what's the mood of them, what's the subplot, what's the backstory here, what are they kind of driving at. And I just wanted to leave people with that lovely B major one, with this rather uplifting, transparent, luminous B major quality that it has. Um, it's such a beautiful piece.
Also, I
Uh,
say to myself, we're talking about the number 17, the B major, Opus 62, number one that you end the
yeah,
album with. I hope we're there. That opening arpeggio is
yes,
already in the 20th century, I'm saying to
that's
myself.
right. Yeah,
So I can see why that would, because you've taken him full journey, if you will, with Nocturne number 17.
yeah.
Because he,
You don't know
in
what to expect from that. Yeah, that's right. It's yeah,
blew my brains out, by the way. That opening arpeggio is like, he's already in the 20th century. You know how they're also ahead of the age in which they
that's
live,
right.
and that was just
It's
superb.
almost like it's a jazz chord. It's a C sharp minor with a seventh and a ninth, and then it resolves onto F sharp major with a seventh in it, and then he leaves the space, and then we're into B major. That's where it's just a cadence that's predicting and anticipating this. Right, I'm going to take you into this beautiful home space of B major, and this is our sound world now. So
Yeah.
pay attention. It's just beautiful.
And
Yeah.
a perfect ending to the album and to this series of nocturnes, I think. So
Yeah.
that's beautifully organized as far as I'm concerned. Well, okay, let me go back a little bit here. Anything else did we discuss number 15, the F minor? We did, we touched on it, yeah. A
Well,
little bit the Opus 55. And that's toward the end also, obviously, Opus 55.
yes. I think
I love
that
your delicate hesitancies in the introduction. Did you hear me? We're a little, but I love the delicate hesitancies in the intro. And by the way, I've heard delicate hesitancies throughout the album, which I had never thought about in Chopin.
okay.
And am I
Yeah.
wrong?
No, you're right. And actually, thinking about it, the way that the Opus 15 starts from the C to the F with the little F major chord, um, and the way that the F minor starts, D ba da da, it's very similar. But it's just showing you how different he can be, even in the same guy, same instrument. A few years later, here I am thinking, I'm going to take you into this place, but it's more or less the same. Yeah, the way it just sits at the keyboard. Yeah. And I mean, it's just masterful. And each time I go back to them, you think, there's that. I've missed that. There's just so much more all the time, Dan. Because I did these in those were put down in 2010, The ballads of 2020 during lockdown. That's another story.
You mean
And
when
then
you recorded them?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, and then it took a long time because there was a big delay on getting the
sure.
Bach album
Oh,
out
sure.
to sit on them, and then we recorded the nocturnes in September 21, and then they put the album together. By which time I'd sort of forgotten about the ballads. But listen, I tend not to listen to, as people don't. I tend not to listen to my own stuff. You listen to it and think, oh, come on. But I did start having a little listen over the last couple of days because I knew we were going to have this conversation, thinking, what was I playing? And actually, I think you're right. That grouping of them as a set is rather nice. It does work, and so I've now had what I'm trying to say is 4 years on from the ballads and 2.5 years on from recording the nocturnes. I'm in agreement with you as a program. It's I was a bit concerned at first that maybe that didn't hold together, but I think it does work as an hour's worth of music rather nicely. And I think
absolutely.
That's not me. That's just the compositions in that order. But you're right to point it out where you could have just had number one, a nocturne, number two, two nocturnes, number three, another nocturne, number four, and finish that kind of thing. But I think it works better this way.
Yes, it does. Yeah, that's why I asked about your that's why I asked about your decision making, the process of decision making. We've kind of done it, but I see a little something from my stream of consciousness notes about number 17, which suits the album perfectly. Phillips gets the complex imagery and meaning perfectly. This nocturne, in this case, the number 17, needs a steady consciousness. You know, it's like be here now. And I think that's really a very important aspect of how you approach everything that I've heard you play. It's a steady consciousness in interpretation. You also have that quality of introspection, which is vital. I mean, it's just absolutely vital in music making. Otherwise, we're back to craft only. Excuse me. Meditation and consciousness. That's my big takeaway from both of these albums.
Well, that's very kind of you to say so, Dan, because that's my aim, is to just play and draw people in to say, well, have a listen to this because it's really fabulous, and just switch off your conscious chatter in your brain and thinking about things. Just let the whole thing, just let it guide you. But you have to be able to guide people through that. That's my aim in performing, and just to make people. I want that situation where you can literally hear a pin drop, and you've just made people realize that this is such lovely music that they can just absorb it and get out of their day-to-day headspace and just be in this, as you say, almost meditative. And I think it's a really good point, Dan, because I think it's fair, and I think you're right, and I think I have worked at it because I used to struggle with it as a boy, is the self-consciousness of performing and having multiple conversations in your head, your ego getting in the way, and not being able to concentrate on the task. And it took years and years of just getting rid of all that and allowing yourself to say, well, I've done the work. I want to get this work across. I'm just going to enjoy the process. I'm going to think about my work. This is where I spend most of my time doing this. I'm going to bring you along with me and just get rid of all of that extraneous stuff that is judging you and criticizing you as you're playing. It's just let it be, just play. And then frankly, you've got more of your 100% of your concentration is on the job at hand, and you're more likely to achieve the aim you set out. But as soon as your brain is thinking about other things, what are they thinking? Oh, I played a wrong note. All this stuff that is just completely ruinous to a performance. If you can get rid of all that and just be completely subsumed in the moment of reproduction, as it were, it becomes easier as a performer, certainly for someone like me who doesn't naturally show off, and then the job is you can achieve the aim. I'm a reluctant performer, Dan. I don't enjoy the limelight. I'll do it because
you and Gould,
it matters to me to get it across, and then I just try to bring people along with me. So that's it.
Yeah, you and Glenn Gould, which suits perfectly what the project.
Yes, absolutely.
It suits perfectly this recording thing. that
Yeah.
that you have done with these two albums. Totally transformed my understanding of Bach. That's another story. I can't wait to get that one up so people can read it. But that's it. The condition of felt response. I'm going to repeat it again. It's two little phrases, and the absence of rules is very important.
Yeah.
To say nothing of, as the one and only hippie book I ever read, Ram Dass's "Be Here Now," and I must have read that when I was like 20 or something, and had no idea that idea of. And in theater and acting, it's exactly the same thing. Be here now. Be in the moment, and then things take care of themselves, if you will. Assuming craftsmanship and everything else that has to.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Are we? What do you think? Are we? Oh, we're done. We're at an hour, and you have to open the door for your wife here in a minute.
We'll have to go otherwise. Yeah.
So again, my second interview with British pianist Jonathan Phillips. Thank you very, very much for somehow either for being in my life is what I really mean. And we're discussing just at this moment your 2023 Divine Art Recording Group release, Chopin, Ballads and Nocturnes. It all sounds so simple. So, but it takes craftsmanship and intellect and retrospection and all the rest of it. That is why we're involved in great art. That's what it's all about.
Exactly.
I think we're done.
Great. Well, Danny, once again, it's been a huge pleasure. Wonderful talking to you. It's been great fun, and thank you so much for inviting me on to have a chat.
Good. See you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.